In the summer prior to entering the 5th grade, I fell from our backyard tree. It had been infected with the spruce budworm disease. The limb that I was swinging from broke, and I fell approximately 15 ft. I broke both arms, with my left arm being severely injured. I also impacted mud into my nose and throat. The lawn and bare ground around the tree was wet from rain from the prior night. Initially, as the branch snapped and I started to fall, I was surprised to be caught midair by a bright glowing beam which carried me upwards. Upon reaching a glowing bright landscape, I was released. I became quite euphoric and joyous. I immediately recalled jewels floating everywhere. As I moved my hand around them, I came to the awareness that I was flying and floating above our house. I had a wide-angle view and began looking at the lighthouse from the rooftop. I remember laughing at what my mom would say if she saw me on the top of our 3-story home. I remember looking into the 2nd-story window at my parents' bedroom. At this point, I started to hear someone calling my name, but this voice was saying Donald, not Donnie, which everyone used, including my parents. I ignored the voice until a very stern woman's voice said it again. At this point, I turned and saw a tall, square-jawed, heavy, and slightly overweight woman in a yellow flower-patterned sundress. I asked her who she was, and she said, "I'm your grandmother." None of this was spoken because I never saw her lips move when I said, "No, you're not. I know what my grands looks like, and it's not you." At this point, I had only my paternal grandmother living, and that was the grandmother I was talking about. She then said, "All mothers have a mother, and that mother has a mother, and I am one of those." As she said this in my mind, I saw little pictures going back each generation. I noticed her image there 2 or 3 generations back. I reached out and took her hand, and she smiled. As we walked, I asked her where we were and was somewhat surprised with her reply of heaven in a peculiar way. I seemed to doubt her, and I said, "If I'm in heaven, then I want to see Jesus." I was even more surprised when she said okay. As we moved on, I realized the area around us had changed, and I was aware of a glowing building, for lack of better words. As we moved, I was aware that I thought it must be a library because people were reading and learning. In one room, I was surprised to see an Indian, and as I thought that, a very annoyed reply came from the elaborately painted and feathered individual. "I am not an Indian. I have often thought of what he must have said. I remember how he was dressed and think he was one of the South American native tribes on the line of the Mayans, but remember only being bewildered and replying, 'You look like an Indian to me.' A little while later, after seeing other beings reading and learning, my gram stopped and said, 'Wake here.' She would let Jesus know I was here. I remember that I thought I was outside the school principal's office. Oddly, I seemed to slightly hear the conversation in this office as him on the telephone. After the short wait, I remember hearing the phone receiver sat down just prior to him saying yes, okay, right, goodbye. Then I got very nervous as I saw movement, a bright glow moving to the opening. I would have to say that at this point that I was awestruck. At this point the light was too much, and I humbly lowered my head. I never got a clear view of this being that my mom had talked so much about. This would be the part that bothered me the most. When I started to relive it later on, my gram at this moment said what I thought was, "Yes, you are a man. This is Donald." I was confused as to why she didn't just say, "Jesus, this is Donald," but I was too busy trying to understand why he was so bright. I even tried to look through my slightly open fingers to get a glimpse while I struggled to see. I remember him saying very little to my gram. All of a sudden I was aware he was searching or maybe viewing my childhood up until that point. I remember him stopping at a memory of mine which I was ashamed. I saw the event, the theft of a toy rubber knife from a Main Street department store, from a different angle. I saw me from a distance, running out the loading dock door and home. It was all from a distance and detached. He paused slightly to see my reaction and with no judgment whizzed through the rest. After this, my gram and he talked. She turned to me and said, "You have to go back." I think I even surprised myself when I said, "No, I want to stay here." Graham said that would make my family very sad because they love me very much. I said no they don't, and was told to look. As I looked down through what I thought was a television, I could see my sister and my brothers trying to revive me. My older sister was digging the mud out of my throat and nose. I was surprised. I could hear her saying, Donnie, breathe please," as she slapped my face. Then my gram bent down and while on one knee turned me around and looked me straight in the face. With her hands on my shoulders, she said the words that would haunt me, "Donald, you've got to go back. But remember, you are part of something very important." As I turned to look again at what was happening with my body being confused as to what my gram meant, and before I could inquire, I felt a huge push from behind. I fell headlong into the lank body and started gasping for engulfing air. The pain was awful. I started to relate what had happened, but no one believed a word. Over time, even I forgot sounds impossible, but when all of your family tells you that you're mistaken, even you start to believe it. So into the back of my mind, it went 8 years into my marriage, and after the last of our 4 children was born is when this all started coming back to me in dreams, hearing certain things. And then my brother tells me the Hebrew name for Jesus was Joshua. A rush of memories flooded, and then sadly, I didn't get to tell my mother the whole story until she was in the hospital and had only 2 weeks to live. I wish that I had told her sooner, but I'm glad that I finally did. She made me promise to tell my siblings, all 7 of them. When I finally told my wife what she said, "Honey, I can see why you never told anyone. You were afraid that no one would believe you." I laughed out loud and was surprised to hear myself say, "No, dear, I didn't tell anyone because I didn't believe it, because for years I was an atheist and religion, well, I didn't have a place." I'd like to end by saying that I've tried over the last 5 years to tell people this event. Even now when I get to the point where Joshua comes out to greet me, I get that same rush of emotions. I start crying and get embarrassed, and then I just stop telling people midway through. I think that's why when they asked me if I knew my mother and family loved me, I said no, not like this. It seems that love in the physical sense is nothing compared to real love.